Hello, BookTube. It's Wednesday, and once upon a time, that was New Comic Book Day, when new comic books went to comic shops all over the country, and you could go to your LCS, your local comic shop, and stand there and look at them all, and maybe buy some of them. It's looking, since the superhero comic book industry, Marvel and DC, it's looking that since they took a hit with the pandemic, that first their shops were ordered closed as non-essential businesses, and then their one and only distributor said, we're not going to do this anymore, we're stopped for the duration. And then the publishers, the editorial teams at both of those publishers told their artists and writers to start putting their pens down and stop working on future projects. It looked for a while like that, like New Comic Book Day would just be canceled completely. But now, naturally, since these are billion-dollar industries, naturally they're trying to start up in some way or other and start some other kind of distribution route and start some other kind of distribution routine. It looks like it's possible that when the dust settles from all this, if there is a superhero industry comic book anymore, New Comic Book Day will be on Tuesday instead of Wednesday. That makes a whole lot of sense, just from the shipping point of view, because Tuesday is the new day for books and magazines. And there's room on those trucks. That makes a whole lot of sense for that day. That if you're using the same distributor, the same shipping company, the same trucks, that your bales would be on them at the same time. But one way or another, didn't new comic shops get comics on Tuesday anyway? Isn't that the way that they got their shipments on Tuesday and they just distributed them on Wednesday? Maybe that was always been the case. But one way or another, we're a long way off. Here in Massachusetts, we're a long way off from any possibility of me just putting on a face mask and going to a comic shop to browse. Browsing is still a long way off in Massachusetts. I would guess that it is. I follow our coronavirus numbers every day in detail, and it looks like we're still a long way off. I'd be willing to bet that if that happens at all, it'll happen this summer. But in the meantime, because I like talking about comics on this channel, and because I've done it for a long time on Wednesday, I am talking about comics on Wednesday, but they're my back issues. They're the issues from my cardboard long boxes that I have all over the place, scattered all over the place. I don't have 500 of those boxes, like a lot of the neck-bearded comic book fans on YouTube have. I don't have 500 of those boxes putting 1.7 tons of weight on the floor of my living room. And I also don't have above them on the wall in what looks a lot like a sacred crèche, I also don't have thousands of comic book superhero action figures. I don't have any of that. But I do have issues that I've held on to. I don't want to hear any comedians in the peanut gallery saying, we already know you have issues, okay? It just is. Zip it. So we're going to go through these. Let's see what we have here. Probably some new things, some old things. Okay, all right. The first one is, well, these will be mostly old. This is purely for the artwork. This is from 1993. This is a Valiant Comics. For a while, started up a roster of superheroes. I think I showed you one with Archer and Armstrong that was quite good. And I showed you those Archer and Armstrong issues because they were drawn and written by Barry Windsor-Smith, who was a comic book artist who did a lot of great work. I think he gets better as he goes along. I just love him. And he did, one of the Valiant comic book creations was Eternal Warrior. And he did a couple of issues of those. And because he did them, I wasn't following the storyline, but because he did the artwork, I just got these issues, just to enjoy them. So the perfect example of what I'm talking about, I would never, even if Valiant were to ever make a collection, an omnibus of all of the run of Eternal Warrior, I wouldn't want it. I would just want the issues that Barry Windsor-Smith drew, and I wouldn't pay for the whole thing. Okay, this is artwork by an artist named Jim Fern, who I don't think does comic books anymore. I don't think that he does. But this is Legion, 1990. It is not the Legion of Superheroes. It is not. It is L period, E period, G period, I period, O period, N period. That actually stands for something, and I once upon a time knew what it stood for. This is a 20th century team, hence Superman on the cover. This is a 20th century team that is led by Vril Dox, a Colowan, a Brainiac, who is the ancestor of the Brainiac 5, who is a teenage member of the Legion of Superheroes. And this is their annual. I never thought that this book would have an annual. Jim Fern's artwork is so good. And this guest star Superman, I'm pretty sure that's why. why I got it is because it guest stars Superman. Uh, but look at that, great stuff, just great. But I did buy and read a few issues of Legion itself. The Legion always had it the year after it, so you can easily tell when these things were made. I did buy a few issues, though they were awful soap opera to me. There were a couple of issues that stood out as standalones. One that was drawn by Keith Giffen, but most of them no. So if I ever had them, I've long since got rid of them, and I'm sure that I have seen bunches of them in used shops, either in the basement of a New England Comics here in Boston or at the Antique Mart up in Vermont. There's an Antique Mart up in Vermont that has a big corner of back issue comics, all cheap, all like $1 or $2. I'm sure that I've seen large numbers of Legion issues there, but there are only a couple that I would want. So again, a perfect example. I would never get a collected issue. I don't think Legion has ever been collected. I think that DC has sort of quietly disowned it, but I don't even know it's canon anymore. But one way or another, I don't think I've ever collected it. I would never get that collection if they did, because this would be one of the only kinds of things that I want. So why bother? Okay. Talk about something Marvel's never collected. They've made crappy trade paperbacks, but this needs a big omnibus, preferably remastered. This is from the 1970s. Yes, 1975. And this is Giant Size Invaders #1. This is the introduction of a 1940s superhero team made by Roy Thomas with art by Frank Springer. And it is just, can I show you? Frank Robbins, rather. Frank Robbins does the artwork. He is so good, but he is so odd. his art style is so odd. Yeah, I mean, well, no, I can't really. Well, let me show you just the opening panel here with Captain America and Bucky, his teen sidekick. See, I don't know if you can tell, that just doesn't. It doesn't make a whole lot of fluid sense there. But we can go over panel breakdown at some other time. This is see, there we go. Here is a Nazi villain fighting our heroes. And way down at the bottom of the page, he's kicking one of them in the face. And this is the main action, but that is just him getting his balance. He's not even hitting anyone on that side. He's hitting something here. And although that's the center of the panel, it's one of the last places that your eye will look. It's one way or another, I still love this artist. I think he's fantastic. And I love this idea. Roy Thomas, of course, was the history-inclined writer at Marvel Comics, and he pushed this idea. What about some marquee characters? You have Captain America, you have the original Human Torch, not the teenage member of the Fantastic Four, but the 1940s version who was an android. You have the Prince Namor, the Submariner, and Captain America's young sidekick Bucky, and the Human Torch's young sidekick Toro, who is a mutant, who just happens to have the same flame powers as the Human Torch. So this team has 2 mutants on it, because the Submariner technically is one as well. And Roy Thomas just said, what were their adventures? These characters launched Timely Comics that became Marvel Comics. What if I made a new team and gave them adventures? And it was great. Almost the whole run of the Invaders is just fantastic. And Marvel has done cheap trade paperback reprints of some of these. I think I have one of them. But what I really want is a big hardcover omnibus that is done right, because this went on for years, and it was very enjoyable. But I'm glad I have Giant Size Invaders #1. Absolutely. Okay. And then we have a run from, this is going to be the 70s. It had to be the 70s. You couldn't get these published today. This is The Defenders, a comic book that Marvel put out starring a non-team. They called themselves a non-team. The Defenders were not like the Avengers. They were not like the Invaders, because there was no bylaws. People came and went as they pleased. It was a very informal type thing. The de facto leader, was Doctor Strange. And some of the core members were the Hulk, sometimes the Submariner, Valkyrie, a couple of other characters that came and went, and Nighthawk, a kind of... he started off as a Batman ripoff, and then the various writers of Defenders Comics, did their best to flesh him out as an individual character. Number 18 and number 19 feature the team fighting the Wrecking Crew, a group of villains who they're just brute force. They don't have any energy, any powers like that. This is a Gil Kane cover that is not particularly good. It's not particularly good. It's rare that Gil Kane will design a cover that's not good, but this one isn't. We have Doctor Strange swatting one of these guys in the face with his hands. Doctor Strange, as you know, if you've watched the $1 trillion Marvel Cinematic Universe franchise, he's not a physical fighter. He's the master of mystic arts. Why he's punching someone or slapping them, I have no idea. And also, in the design of this cover features the Incredible Hulk, one of the most visually dramatic characters that Marvel has. But what is the high point? What is the visual focal point of this cover? It's the Wrecker's ass. it's his ass. So not a particularly good Gil Kane cover, but the issues are really good. And then these are the ones that I was talking about. This story could never be done in the 21st century. Our modern censors would not allow it. This is 4 issues centering around race violence in the inner cities of America, with a group called the Sons of the Serpent, who are race baiters. They are the Marvel Comics version of the KKK or a Trump rally, where they want to inflame their listeners against other races. And the idea that a Marvel comic could be so relevant that it could have a fat white man spitting on a black man and the black man convulsing in rage because he's had enough, that could never happen in a Marvel comic today. And this 4-issue run is really, really good. Not just because it's controversial, but also because it has lots of great secondary characters that are a lot of fun. The Son of Satan, Damian Hellstrom, and Daredevil guest stars in here, and also a wonderful turn by Yellow Jacket, a version of an Avengers character who ends up coming across really well in these issues. See, that's a Gil Kane cover that does work. There you go. That's one that does work. There's where an editor reminded him that Doctor Strange uses mystical ability and that you want to put the emphasis on the Hulk. That sort of thing. I don't know if the Defenders has Marvel they do a run of full color reprints called Epic Collections. And I don't know if this is Steve Gerber. Those of you who don't know comic books, comic book writers tend to be very much team players. They want to study continuity. They want their plots to make sense. They're looking for the big epic fan response. And Steve Gerber was not one of those writers. He was weird and very intelligent. These issues, if I remember correctly, I'll never be able to find it quickly, but during Steve Gerber's run on this book, he introduced a one-page thing that happened in many of his issues, where an ordinary couple was just having an ordinary evening when suddenly an elf rings the doorbell. A guy dressed in an elf costume rings the doorbell, and when they go to answer, the elf pulls out a gun and kills them, shoots them dead. And fans started writing in saying, okay, all right, that was a little weird, but what was that? I mean, when are we going to get our resolution to that? And it never happens. It never happens. And there have been rumors for a long time, for 30 years, and I believe them. The rumors are that Steve Gerber never intended those things to have any kind of resolution, that he never intended that to happen, that he was always just going to have them just sit there. Now I'm kind of determined to find one here. These are fantastic issues. They're full of action. They're full of great character development. And they also have Steve Gerber's slightly subversive writing. He's one of the only writers at Marvel, then or since, who would have seriously pitched the idea of the Defenders getting themselves involved in race warfare. He's the only one who would have seriously pitched that idea and would have got it allowed, where they would have said, okay, you can do it. But no, I don't think I'm going to be able to find the elf at the door. It's kind of funny. I wish I could, because then you'd see the kinds of stuff that this author used to do that nobody else did. You knew when you were in a Steve Gerber book. You definitely knew that. Because he was doing things that didn't make any sense. Or that made too much sense, where his characters would be very, very real. That's one thing you notice when you're reading this 4-part story, for instance, is how real the characters are. How they gripe, and they have serious issues, and envy of each other, and admiration of each other. Okay, you go. This is never resolved. The guy he's just hanging out with his wife, They're both shot dead, and it's never resolved. But anyway, I would love a big epic collection of the great run of the Defenders, maybe from 1 to issue 30 would be awesome. Oh my, this has seen better days, hasn't it? Good Lord. Okay, this is from 1965. This is from 1965. I've read this many, many, many times. This is Journey into Mystery, number 125. Where Thor fight the great Jack Kirby cover. Look at that. Couldn't be any simpler, and yet it's perfect. And this is when this is part of a storyline, a 5-part storyline where Thor fights Hercules and then teams up with Hercules. And this is notable because it's the last issue of Journey into Mystery. After this, the numbering continued with 126, but it just became the Mighty Thor. It wasn't Journey into Mystery anymore. That's where he originally started. But look at that. Hercules is stopping a bank robbery. Uses his mace to blast down a lamppost and then throws it right to rip out the axle and the wheels of the car. Look at that. That is awesome. Kirby at his best. Inked by Vinnie Coletta. And this is the last. I have this in many, many editions. I don't know why I don't just put this issue out of its misery because it's falling apart. Okay, then we have another issue of Thor. We jump forward 10 years. 1973, yep. This is Thor number 218. This is part of the Black Nebula saga that I just got a epic collection of Thor for, so I don't need this issue anymore. This is just something that I bought a long time ago. The Black Nebula series was tremendously good. It was hard science fiction, very, very enjoyable, and featuring Thor and his Asgardian friends, his Asgardian colleagues that I always think is just terrific. I love the storyline. This is John Buscema artwork, inked by Jim Mooney, I believe. Yeah, inked by Jim Mooney. Big, epic stuff. Nice, nice stuff. Okay, then we jump forward a few more issues to The Mighty Thor number 222. This is a great Gil Kane cover. We once again have Hercules, Thor and Hercules teaming up, once again against Pluto, the Lord of the Underworld, although the villain of this particular issue is Ares, the Greek god of war, who is given I believe a perfunctory defeat in here. He barely gives our heroes any trouble at all. Yeah, he fights them just briefly and then is rather easily defeated. But it's great stuff because there you have John Buscema being inked by Joe Sinnott, and he just does a great job with that. Just a fantastic job. And this is Hercules is sitting it out because they're best friends. And they just decide, they decide amongst them, Thor says, he's mine and mine alone, don't help me. So Hercules just sits on the sidelines and says, well, now that I've got nothing better to do, how about if I quiz you? What's that hammer story anyway? That's kind of neat. I like the way, who was this? Is this Jerry Conway? I like the way this author does, Jerry Conway. I like the way this author does Hercules. They start off with the arm wrestling match to end all arm wrestling matches. Terrific stuff. Okay, then we have the Avengers. This is number 84. This is also John Buscema artwork. But in this issue, this is also an effective John Buscema cover, kind of a rarity. But this issue features John Buscema inked by Tom Palmer, who is, in my opinion, in the whole length of this artist's career, his best inker. But Tom Palmer was a fairly slow and very methodical inker. So you get some of his great work. He teamed up with Buscema's brother Sal Buscema on the Avengers for some great runs. But this is see if I can get look at the coloring and detail there. It's just amazing. That's just incredible. And Buscema's panel by panel figure work is so strong that a lazy inker will often think, well, that's all I really need. I'll just do that. When that's not a good inker will enhance. They will add something to the penciler's artwork. And Palmer does a great job with that. He's also the best inker for the artist Gene Colan. Oh my. Gene Colan's run on Tomb of Dracula, inked by Tom Palmer, is just incredible. Just amazing. What have we got next here? Oh, okay. All right. This is Marvel Comics. This is a one-shot. This is Conan the Barbarian versus Rune. Rune was a totally evil space vampire who had his own comic with, I don't think it was Marvel. I think wasn't Rune Valiant or somebody else than that? I'm not really sure if this is going to tell me. Rune and all those things like the copyright of Malibu Comics. Okay, Malibu Comics, not Marvel. But this is drawn and written by Barry Windsor-Smith again. And the reason why it is special, the reason why a lot of fans, the reason why this is a natural team-up, even though Rune is not a natural team-up with Conan, the reason why this is a natural team-up is because Barry Windsor-Smith cut his teeth on Conan the Barbarian. He did the first few issues of Marvel Comics when their version of Conan the Barbarian and caught on. Fans loved that. This is Barry Windsor-Smith several decades later, and his artwork here is much, much better, much less pandering to like the stakes of Jack Kirby or anything like that. And he's associated with Conan the Barbarian because of that, and of course he's associated with Rune, who I don't think has ever appeared afterwards. Rune had his own series with Malibu that I bought every issue, even though I don't like books that are about villains. I bought every issue because they were all drawn by Barry Windsor-Smith. And so it was natural that fans would say, well, okay, we like Rune, and if he's going to team up with anybody, we want him to team up with Conan because it's Barry Windsor-Smith's signature character. And that's why I bought this issue. Because it was, I thought when I saw it on the stands, I thought there was no internet back then for me to tell me what was coming out. I saw it on the stands, and my first thought was, this could be the last time Barry Windsor-Smith ever draws Conan the Barbarian, so you must get it. And I enjoyed it. So, okay, all right. We saw this issue already, although not with this cover. This is Giant Size Thor #1 with a Gil Kane cover for Odin, for Asgard. There he is with the Warriors 3 taking up the rear. And this is, but not entirely Gil Kane, because the inset, the character design is John Romita Sr. That is from the cover of Giant Size Avengers #1, where John Romita Sr. did such a great job with the character of Thor, the look of him, flying, leaping into action, that they just kept it for this. They used it as the cover design for this. But this is the story of the Indestructible Destroyer, the same one that we saw in the original annual for Thor. And at the time I mentioned that it had a bad Jack Kirby cover, and this has a great Gil Kane cover, and they just reprinted it. So I kept this one, even though I have both. And now I have that in an omnibus and also in an Epic collection. So I really don't need any more copies of that particular giant-sized issue. Okay, then we have a character we've seen before. This is Nexus, created by Mike Baron and Steve Rude. This is Nightmare in Blue. This is issue numbers 2 through 4, and this is black and white. They aren't all, but this is black and white. This is Nexus in black and white. Still great Steve Rude artwork. But I have #1 to Nightmare in Blue somewhere. Somewhere I do. These are painted Steve Rude covers for Nexus, who is a murderer of mass murderers, and comes with his whole a whole vocabulary, a whole world of his own. Great Gulasarian. This calls for hyperspeed, all sorts of things like that. What it is instead of what is it. Great Gulasarian is something that I love Nexus so much that even now sometimes when I want to exclaim something, I will say Great Gulasarian, and if I do it, I think I've done it once on this channel in 4 years. I think I've done it once on camera, and one person said, "Oh, great Nexus call out." That was it. Nobody else had any idea what I was talking about. Nexus is terrific. They are well worth rereading. I, again, would like a really big, uniform omnibus edition. There have been all sorts of reprint editions of Nexus over the years, in one kind or another, and sometimes they maddeningly peter out before they're even done with the run they're reprinting. I'd like it if somebody, I don't even know who owns the rights to Nexus at the moment. Probably, I hope, Mike Baron and Steve Rude do. But what I'd love is a big volume for Nexus fans. Put it out in a limited edition. Just make 1,000 copies. You'd sell them. You'd sell them all. And I would get it, absolutely. But right now, instead of that, I don't have any collected editions of any kind. Instead, I just have issues scattered all over the place. Subpar for the way to do things. Oh, all right. Okay, this is The Watchmen by Alan Moore. And Dave Gibbons. This is issue #1 and issue number 6. The Watchmen is now regarded as one of the greatest graphic novels of all time for comic books, but it did originally come out as comics, individual comics. And I got the first 3 issues totally by random chance. I was buying superhero comics on the metal spinner racks in drugstores at the time, and I was on vacation. I was headed to Cape Cod, and I had a bunch of comics, but I wanted a few more, and I saw the first 3 issues. It used to be that a lot of times the guys that are running the drugstore or whatever would just, they'd get a new issue of the Watchmen and they wouldn't bother with the old ones. They'd just stick them all in the same rack, so that if you sometimes you'd go in and there'd be 4 issues of a thing. And I remember I saw the first 3 issues and I thought, well, I don't know what this is. It's not anything that I ever read. I kind of like Dave Gibbons' artwork, and they have all 3 issues. It was 3 issues at the time, so I'll get them. At least this way I won't be missing anything. And I loved what I read. It's an anti-superhero screed. It's a dystopia. I don't tend to like those things, but I just loved it. This first issue, the backs of these have the doomsday clock. And as each issue progresses, blood starts seeping down from the bottom, and the clock starts ticking closer to midnight. So in this first issue, there's nothing at all. And this first issue features the murder of the comedian, a seedy superhero who is killed by an unknown assailant at the beginning of the issue, just hurled through a window. And that causes one of the other characters in the story, Rorschach, to wonder if maybe someone's hunting former superheroes, and the whole plot takes off from there. This issue, of course, is devoted to Rorschach, as you can tell from the cover. Wow, I should take all of my individual Watchmen issues and put them together instead of having them all scattered around. Okay, all right. This next is Spectacular Spider-Man, another Spider-Man knockoff. These are from the 90s, I believe. Yeah, 1992. These are drawn by Sal Buscema. Just fantastic artwork job. It's a 3-issue story in which Spider-Man teams up with the X-Men, and I'm not a huge fan of Spider-Man. I'm not a huge fan of the X-Men either, but I loved the Sal Buscema artwork, and I loved the story. I thought it was really good. It was a kind of superhero team up in which you get the impression that the characters know each other, which of course they would. They're practically co-workers. They're superheroes in Manhattan, so after a while they would know each other, and this had a feel of that. It wasn't just plug in superhero A, plug in superhero B. I kind of like that, so I kept them, especially since, once again, I never bought any other issues of Spectacular Spider-Man. So if these were ever collected, I would be necessarily buying in a collection a whole bunch of stuff I'm never even going to glance at. So I just kept these issues instead. Okay, all right, how odd. Then we have Marvel Premiere. Marvel Premiere was one of those showcase comic titles where it wasn't a regular artist or writer, it wasn't a regular character. Instead, it was just a 1-issue, 1-shot, or 2 issues or 3 issues, whatever you had in your inventory. And this is a character called Man-Wolf, who was introduced in Spider-Man. He's the son of J. Jonah Jameson. And this re-envisioning of him imagined him as a high fantasy character. And I don't care about the re-envisioning, but I did care very much that the artwork was by George Perez, who at this time I was already starting to love. So I got these issues just for that, and have kept them just for that. Now, I seem to remember that just recently there was a Man-Wolf collected volume. I think I remember seeing that online, that collects his original appearances in Spider-Man, which would be worthwhile for me because they're drawn by John Romita Sr., and then his subsequent appearances, and also this Marvel Premiere storyline, which I think is 3 issues long. That volume, that would probably be worth my while to get, even though I'm not all that interested in the character, because I'm interested in a lot of the ways the character's been portrayed. So I'll have to look into getting that online, because I can't get that in person. And then, okay, we'll end up with something we've seen before. This is from the 70s. From the 70s, and it reflects something in comics that we've been talking about on these comic book days, which is a run. What constitutes a run, where an artist and a writer get together on a particular book and stay together long enough to develop the sync necessary to come up with just a fantastic realization of that character. And that run can be 10 issues, 20 issues, more than that, and then it goes away. New creative people are introduced. Usually there are stumbling issues at the beginning, and then they go on in their own direction. Sometimes they'll have a run of their own. And I love them. And as I've mentioned, one of the easiest ways to make sure that you get a run on a book is if the writer and the artist are the same person. We've seen this before, but these are the next 2 issues. DC Comics, when they had the rights to Edgar Rice Burroughs, did Tarzan, and they gave it to Joe Kubert, the artist Joe Kubert. And he decided to tell Tarzan's adventure story across the whole of the first 3 issues. And it's just fantastic. It's just amazingly good. It incorporates not only his origin story, but also stories from Jungle Tales of Tarzan as well. Just It's just amazing stuff. Just amazing stuff. A definitive look at this character with backups in these issues of John Carter of Mars. And this is a perfect example. I have no idea that the rights to Edgar Rice Burroughs have moved on from DC. DC does not have the rights to them anymore. I'm straining at the moment to remember who does. Marvel just got the rights to Robert E. Howard, to the Conan and Red Sonja and all that. But I don't know who has Tarzan at the moment. Is it still IDW or Black Horse or something like that? One way or another, it's a copyright and trademark nightmare. So, for instance, if DC Comics wanted to print an omnibus volume of Joe Kubert's work on Tarzan, which extended on and off for 30 or so issues, could they do it legally? I don't even know. I don't know if they could or not. And that's a terrible shame, because that means these great things will languish forever. If they're not collected into book form, the comics, no matter how pristinely they're kept, they're going to get rarer, harder to find, and less possible to read, which is the whole point of a book of any kind, is to read it. And that's a shame. That's a real shame. So I don't know, I guess I could do some research and see whether or not it's possible for anybody to put the Joe Kubert Tarzan issues into a collection, or whether or not anybody's ever done that. That would be incredible. That'd be absolutely incredible. Marvel, when they had they had Edgar Rice Burroughs, they put a team on Tarzan, starting out with John Buscema, who did a couple of really good issues and then left. And they put a team on John Carter of Mars, and that started out really well as well. And they did a big omnibus volume of John Carter of Mars. I don't know if they've ever done one for their own Tarzan, and I don't know now if they would be able to. If Marvel Comics once printed an omnibus collection of John Carter of Mars, could they do it again? Or do they lose it when the whole thing migrates to some other owner? It's a nightmare. It's a nightmare. It's one of the reasons why I have kept these things, because I don't know where they would ever occur again. Same thing with Nexus and the various publishers who've done that. Same thing with anybody who's done a comic book version of, well, we saw the Dracula adaptation with Mike Mignola, but it could be any other. I don't know. Even the current Marvel Comics adaptation of Conan. What happens when they lose the franchise? I don't know. I don't know one way or another. So one way or another, I'm holding on to these issues. I love rereading them, but they're not going to take many more years of rereading, and that's a shame. I wish there were a collected volume that would be a little bit more durable. But anyway, that is your Comic Book Wednesday. No new comics, but plenty of old ones, and we have plenty more old ones to go. So I'll do another video on Friday. I sort of made an informal idea that I would do comics on Wednesday and Friday, and last Friday I did another walkthrough of back issues, and I had a number of people email me. I leave my email on every video. If you're brand new to the channel, that is not marketing. That does not lead you to my merch. That leads you directly to me, so feel free to email me. I would ask only that, one, you recognize that I get a lot of emails, so I might not be able to respond right away. And two, I would ask you to look over the email you're about to send me to make sure it does not include a just flat-out insult. If you flat-out personally insult me, I will not appreciate it. I will not appreciate it at all. If you write and tell me that I have fundamentally misunderstood some book that you know perfectly well I've been reading for 50 years, I'm not going to take that well. Feel free to write and tell me you disagree, but think twice before writing to tell me you're an idiot, because nobody likes getting emails like that in the mail, including me. But I had a number of emails from people saying last Friday that, you know, we're comic book fans, we're interested in the comic book back issues, but you sort of mentioned that you would talk about a graphic novel on Fridays, and would kind of like that too, because I have a lot of graphic novels, and that I might do that. I might switch it up that way. We shall see. There's still 2 days before then and now, so I'll wrap this up for now, but I'll be back. Thank you, Book 2.